I know it was just a dream, but it felt so real, and I felt absolutely amazing while I was there. Kevin sat back in his chair, frustrated. When I'm there, I don't want to wake up because I can feel the sun on my face and see everything so clearly. I notice the details of life again, and it seems as though everything is fresh and new.
But it was just a dream. Don't you realize while you are there, you're asleep and not living life here where you're meant to be?
This life sucks. I spend most of my day either going to work, working, or heading home from work. The money I make is just enough to pay for my place to live, some food, and the rest basically goes for my vehicle and related expenses to get me to work. I have to save for weeks in order to buy myself a new pair of shoes or pants, which, inevitably, get ruined from working. He sat forward and lit a cigarette, waving it to leave a trail of smoke in the air around him. And these, damn cancer sticks, I wish I could give them up, but I can't, and really I don't want to because they are one of my main pleasures each day. And the government, yeah, those bastards, they know it too and tax the hell out of them because they know I really have no choice but to keep smoking. I tried to quit many times, yet here I am.
You can do anything you set your mind to. You're smart and you know this.
I really wish people would stop saying that. Do you think I want to be here where I am now? Kevin took a long pull from the cigarette and blew the smoke slowly toward the ceiling. Do you really think I want to spend my days building other people's dreams while I watch mine fade into the past like friends who no longer care?
Now you're just feeling sorry for yourself. Your time will come.
Well, if I'm feeling sorry for myself, then you're leaning on the post of hope. Kevin sat back looking toward the window at the gray sky. My time will not come. That's a crutch to keep me going when I should just admit the legs of my dreams are broken and will never heal.
It does no good talking to you when you get like this.
Kevin stared at the gloomy sky silently, waiting for Connie to finish speaking. After several moments he looked around, but Connie was gone, and he was alone once again. He relaxed into his chair and inhaled deeply from the cigarette. Finally, he could relax and consider the dream. He crushed out the smoke in the ashtray and laid the recliner back, closing his eyes. It was Saturday after all, and he had no place to be until work Monday. He let his mind drift until he was standing at the concrete wall next to the cliff. Far below, he could see the cold water of the river, rushing downstream to some unknown place. Unknown to him, anyway, as he had not followed the river to see where it went. And there were no maps here in his dreams because he knew instinctively where he needed to be at any given time. He tried to gauge the distance down to the river and estimated it must be at least several hundred feet. Immediately to his left, a large bushy fruit tree blocked his view, and he reached out to take an orange from the nearest branch. The rind came away easily, and he pulled a large wedge from the fruit, pushing it into his mouth. Even before he bit into it, the juices seemed to gush, filling his mouth with wonderful flavor. He continued to eat as he walked around the tree to the other side so he could see. There was no concrete border here, only rocks piled haphazardly by the ages, forming a long embankment down to the edge of a feeder stream. The water was clear, and he knew instinctively it was also cold. In a small pool, several trout popped the surface as they fed, racing from one end to the other to intercept insects as they entered the pool from the ripples. The pool ended at a natural barrier of rocks where the water flowed over and down the cliff to the river below. As he watched, a trout dashed into the roll of water above the rocks to eat a large bug before it could go over the falls. As suddenly as the bug disappeared in its mouth, the fish realized it was in a bad situation and turned to swim back to the pool. Thrashing its tail powerfully, the fish swam against the current, but it seemed the water would win as it was pulled slowly backward toward the edge. Kevin watched as the fish swam with all of its strength against the current in a futile attempt to reach calmer water, and it reminded him of his life, his real life, not here in the dream. He felt a kinship with this struggling fish, racing against the current to be where he wanted to be. But unlike him, the fish had plunged headlong into danger, defying the odds to get what it wanted. He shook his head and refocused on the fish. There was no place in his dreams for Connie. Just as it seemed the fish would go over the rocks with the water to plunge to the river below, the fish turned its face to one side and down before disappearing into a crevice in the rocks. He saw it emerge a moment later from under the rocks in the calm water near the bottom of the pool. Immediately, it began to hunt for more insects, as if it had not just faced a brush with certain death. He let his eyes wander across the pool to the grassy hillside of the far shore and up to the top of the hill. In the scrub just below the top, he saw several deer slowly feeding along the side of the hill against the pale blue sky. It was a bright, warm morning, and closing his eyes, he turned to let the sun shine on his face. The warmth reached all the way through him to some inner place he could remember it touching when he was a child, and he felt a sudden longing to return to that moment in time. Behind him came the sound of hooves, and he turned to see. For several moments he stared at the beast in the ditch across the road, but he could not define what he was seeing. It seemed to be some crazy combination of horse and cow, as it had the head of both, but he could only see the horse's body, although it had 8 legs. The cow seemed to be a bull, but again he could only see one horn, and it seemed that the cow and horse were fighting. He closed his eyes for a moment to clear the image and looked again. Now the horse had turned toward him, and he could see that by some cruel twist of fate, the cow had lodged the unseen horn into the shoulder of the horse. As they struggled to be free of one another, he could see the horn moving just below the skin. He wondered why the cow did not simply turn that side of its head down to be free of the horse, but looking closer, realized the cow was at an odd angle to where the horn entered. It was as if the cow had been above the horse when the horn pierced, and now, as both were on level ground, it could not be freed. His heart went out to both animals immediately, and he could not help but feel their pain. Rushing towards them, he was not sure what he could do, but he knew he must try to do something. Something in the back of his mind told him that horses could be calmed by covering their eyes, and before he even realized what he was doing, he began to take off his overshirt. Even as he was moving quickly, he had a sudden moment of clarity and wondered why he was even wearing an overshirt on such a warm day. Pushing the thought aside, he threw the shirt over the horse's head and grabbed for the reins. The horse shied as the shirt came toward his face, but by the time he had the reins in his hand, it was almost still. He pulled the reins downward to the ground to pull the horse down, and it seemed to follow. As the horse knelt, the cow's head was turned at an even more odd angle for a moment until its horn pulled free of the horse. Sensing it was free, the bull turned and ran back toward the pasture where they must have come from, and Kevin turned his attention to the horse. Removing the shirt from its head, he allowed the horse to stand as he stroked its mane and pressed the shirt against the wound on its shoulder. Even as he realized he did not have anything with which to provide a field dressing for the wound, he noticed the horse had a saddle on his back. Where was the rider? He looked around but saw no one within sight. Had the rider been hurt when the cow and horse collided? He realized he now had 2 issues to contend with. He needed to bandage the horse and find the rider to see if he was okay. He looked around but had no idea where to start looking. Sure, he could follow the direction the cow took, as it was probably rejoining its herd, but what if it had been astray to begin with? He looked at the horse and considered riding it to find the owner, but he knew he should not because it was injured. He did not want to cause it any more distress.
"You'll let it get away,"
came a voice behind him. "What?" Kevin asked, turning to see who was talking to him, but there was no one there.
"You're letting it get away."
Kevin looked around to see who was talking to him as he lifted the reins. "No, I'm not. See, I have the reins." Clouds were starting to form, and he could hear the distant roar of thunder. Still, he could not see who was talking and wondered what he would do about the horse and rider. He closed his eyes to calm his mind. When he opened his eyes, he was back in his recliner and Connie was before him.
"You're sleeping the day away and letting it get away from you again."
Kevin looked at the window and saw it was almost dark outside. A lightning bolt flashed in the distance, and he heard the roar of thunder almost immediately. It was close. Then the rain began in earnest, and he could not see through it past the window. Getting up from his chair, he lit a cigarette and walked to the window. A hard, pounding rain was falling as the last of the day turned to blackness, leaving him with only the glistening reflections of the rain against the window. Yes, he had slept the evening away. His thoughts returned to the dream, and he wondered what became of the horse and rider. Then suddenly he had to laugh at himself. There was no horse, nor rider, nor bull. It was a dream, and he wondered why his mind had chosen to take the dream in that direction. He had no need to rescue anyone. At least he didn't think he did. Sure, doing such would make him feel good about himself, but why such drama? He turned to the sound of Connie's voice as she brought him back to reality again. "What was that? I was lost in thought," he said.
I asked why it smells like oranges in here. We have about oranges in an age.